Where do you want us?
I think she had the mayor's on this side and state officers on this side, I think, right?
This is on.
Okay. All right. Thank you. All right. You guys are welcome to stand or sit or do whatever you like. Oh, we lost our state officials here. Just hold on one second. I'm gonna have to raise that monitor back there because I can't quite see it with all these cameras. I'm joking, Blake. We're good. I can see it. It's a benefit of being tall. Well, how are you? Good to see you, Director. You can sit if you like, Mayor. Sure. So we're going to need a second or two to get started. Are you good? All right, everybody. I think we're ready to start. Sure. All right, everybody good? Okay. Welcome, everybody, to the Attorney General's office. I'm Peter Neronha, the Attorney General of the state of Rhode Island, and we are here today to give you and the public an update on the status of our ongoing opioids litigation, which will, with respect to some defendants, continue after today, but we do have a significant update to announce today. I want to begin by recognizing some of my colleagues in government that are here with me today. And the reason they're here today is because some of the mayors of cities and towns have been involved in the litigation. Our state leaders are here as well because there is a significant amount of money that will be coming to the state of Rhode Island. And it is under their leadership that money will need to be directed to exactly the same place. And that same place is to remedy and abate this opioid crisis that we have been facing for so long. So first I want to recognize Governor McKee, who was a part of this effort dating back to when he was lieutenant governor, organized cities and towns to bring their own litigation in addition to the litigation brought by this office. So he has certainly been a leader in this space. Senate President Ruggiero is here as well. The Speaker Sakarchi is here. Also here is Secretary Womasetta Jones, who will have a big role in determining and guiding the distribution of these funds, again, to get to exactly the right place. I want to also acknowledge representing the cities and towns, and all 39 cities and towns are participating in the agreement, the settlement that we are announcing here today, but representing those cities and towns are Mayor Alorza, Mayor Lombardi from North Providence, Mayor Alorza, of course, from Providence, and Andy Nona, who is the town administrator in East Greenwich, and I will say was once the town administrator in my hometown of Jamestown. So Andy has served superbly multiple municipalities. I also want to recognize a few other town administrators that are here and thank them for coming. Stephen Contenti from Bristol is here. Mayor De Silva, I believe, is here from East Providence. Town Manager Mollis is here. I see him back there. Town Manager Mollis, thank you for coming. Town Manager Kate Machad from Warren is here. Phil Gould, the Town Administrator from Lincoln, is here. Kate is from Warren, if I didn't mention that. And Karen Pinch, a longtime friend, is here as well from Richmond. I also want to recognize John Tassoni, Senator Tassoni, who's done such great work in this space for so long. And Linda Hurley is also here from Kodak. So great community partners in this space, and today I believe is a good day for the people of the state of Rhode Island. It's no secret that the opioid crisis is something that this state has faced for a very, very long time. What you see on the graphic behind you are just the numbers over the last 5 years. But this is a fight that has gone on for a very, very long time. I remember in August of 2011, I stood in a room much like this one as U.S. Attorney when we brought an action and settled a case against Google for $500 million. And the point of that case, often forgotten today, a decade later, is that was about Google aiding foreign pharmacies importing opioids into the United States without a prescription. And I think if all of us could have seen or read the tea leaves correctly then, we would have understood that the fact that there was a market for people going online to buy opioids without a prescription, and Google assisting those offshore pharmacies, we would have seen the crisis that was still yet to come in full force and effect. And we talk about the numbers, and it was really important to me as we developed this slide with these numbers. The first iteration of it had a estimate, and more than 1,600 people, I think, was the first iteration of this number. And I wanted the team to go back and put a specific number on each one of these years, because every number is a person, every number is a family. And every family has been impacted by this crisis. I think all of us in this room have lost a family member or know somebody who has. And this crisis is long from over. This next slide shows you a little bit of the track of this really complicated litigation. When I think about sort of what we've done here in this space and what continues to need to be done, I really break it down into a number of categories. So there are companies that manufactured opioids. The two principal ones that are at issue here in our case are Johnson & Johnson and Purdue and the Sacklers. So we're here today to announce a settlement with Johnson & Johnson as a manufacturer. I'll talk a little bit about Purdue later on in this presentation, but they are not part of the settlement that we announced today. There are also there's another manufacturer, Teva, that is also not part of the settlement that we announced today. And again, I'll talk about where we're going with that litigation towards the end of this presentation. But we're here today to announce a settlement with Johnson & Johnson and also to announce a settlement with the three major opioid distributors, AmerisourceBergen, Cardinal, and McKesson. And as I said earlier, it has been a bit of a tortured path. This litigation has been incredibly complex. There's been a ton of work done here in the state since we filed on behalf of this office and the people of the state of Rhode Island an actual case. It's not been done everywhere around the country. What that required was a ton of litigation, pre-litigation work as we approached our initial trial date of January of this year. So I want to break down for you the monies that have been recovered to date and then the new monies that we're announcing today. So what we've already announced is our $2.59 million settlement with McKinsey for their role in fueling the opioid epidemic. That was announced last year, and some of that money is already being put to good effect. There was as many of you know, there was a gap in our ability to fund Narcan and naloxone last year, and this money was used, a portion of this money was used to fill that gap. That's a good example, I think, of how we anticipate and will require, frankly, this money to be used. It must be used, and it will be used, and we will be keeping a very careful eye to make sure that it will be used to fund programs and projects that will abate this opioid crisis. This is the new portion of the settlement that we are announcing today. This is a $21.1 million settlement with Johnson & Johnson for their role in the opioid crisis. As I said, they were a manufacturer. In our judgment, they downplayed and were deceptive concerning the risk of using opioids. And as a result of our settling with that company today, $21.1 million will be returned to the state of Rhode Island for opioid abatement. We're also settling, as I mentioned, with the three major opioid distributors, AmerisourceBergen, Cardinal, and McKesson. That is $90.8 million that will be delivered to the state of Rhode Island over a period of time that will be used, again, pursuant to that agreement solely for opioid abatement. And so if you look at this slide, what this shows you is the breakdown of the monies that will be distributed to the state of Rhode Island for purposes, again, of opioid abatement. It totals roughly $114 million. And again, that money will be directed to one place and one place only, and that is to address the ongoing opioid crisis that we face in the state. This again just drives point point home. I know that throughout my conversations with many people in this space over now a very long period of time, the question has always been, and frankly, it is one of my regrets with respect to the Google settlement that we achieved over a decade ago. That money could not be used directly for opioid abatement. It had to be used for law enforcement purpose. It did a lot of good, including places like North Providence and other places, East Providence and the state generally, but it could not be driven to opioid abatement. So it was really important, I think, for me and my fellow attorneys general around the country as we negotiated these settlements, and most states have joined a version of this settlement, that all of the monies be used for opioid abatement and that there be safeguards in place to make sure that that actually happens. So what is opioid abatement? I think most of us, can intuitively understand what that is, but just as a reminder, it can go to things like treatment, overdose rescue programs, prevention, and recovery. I don't think that it will be difficult to find opportunities and programs and initiatives to use this money. As I said, just the gap that we saw last year for Narcan and naloxone, I was grateful that we were able to, working with the Secretary to get the money to where it needed to be, but there's no question that this money is needed and can be put to good use. These settlements are about more than just money, though. In all instances, both McKinsey and the distributors are going to be required to take actions to make sure that going forward, that the kind of behavior that we've seen in the past does not happen again. Some of that, frankly, is just doing a better job of reporting to state and federal authorities suspicious orders. I think, if I look back on it, and again, the Google experience kind of informs this, there was this time period in our country when opioids were simply handed out like candy. Doctors were prescribing them. Pharmacies were filling them. Distributors were distributing them. If you looked at the data and saw the data, you could see problems, and yet nothing was done about them. And that's true in government too. I remember as U.S. Attorney, one of my great frustrations, frankly, was that the DEA was not doing everything in Rhode Island that I felt that they should be doing regarding pill diversion. And that is something that stays with me today. Hopefully, as part of this settlement, we will be in a better place as a state working with our federal partners to identify suspicious orders as they go forward. But there's no question that has been a challenge in the past. So, as I said, this has been a complicated process. So, we'll get into this a little bit, but the bottom line is this, that there has been multi-district litigation that the cities and towns have participated in Ohio. It's part of a lawsuit that they brought. Our lawsuit here, the Attorney General's office, our lawsuit was brought here in Superior Court in Rhode Island. Some of my Attorney General colleagues are part of what's called a multi-state litigation. And so getting all of these parties around a table to try to reach an agreement that would satisfy everybody has been complicated. And so the question for me, frankly, here all along was, given that we had filed a case, we had a trial date coming, what was in the best interest of this state in terms of whether to settle the case as part of the global settlement, with a few additional things, hopefully for Rhode Islanders, or simply to proceed to trial. And ultimately, it was my judgment that this was the best resolution for the people of the state. It enhances the global settlement that all but a handful of states have signed on to in a couple of ways. First of all, it will speed the monies up in terms of their arrival here in the state of Rhode Island. So the first payment under the global settlement that many states will be subject to won't be until the summer. Under our negotiated agreement, the first payment will be within a few weeks, and then there'll be a second payment in the summer of 2022. Again, as I mentioned, this has been a really complicated series of negotiations, and part of it has been complicated by the relationship between cities and towns that have brought their own lawsuit on behalf of the population of their cities and towns, and the Attorney General who sued, I sued, and my colleagues around the country have sued on behalf of every person in the state, including all the people in those same cities and towns. And so working out an agreement that doesn't double count people, I won't hold back from you, has been complicated. But what I can say is that because of that complication, the agreements around the country are still somewhat in doubt. By negotiating our own independent agreement, we can guarantee that these monies will in fact flow to the state of Rhode Island. And the other plus for doing the settlement this way is we anticipate a significant additional amount of money. If I had to estimate it, I would say it's in the range of about $10 million, which will reflect the work of this office, the lawyers in this office, in addition to outside counsel, which is something separate, but the work of this office, in terms of our own litigative costs, that it is my intention to drive back into this settlement, so that the monies that will reflect the work by this office on behalf of the people of the state of Rhode Island will not be held by this office, but will in fact be returned to the General Assembly and state government to be allocated for opioid abatement. And so that's an enhancement to the global settlement that I think will serve the people of Rhode Island well. This is a slide that is so small that even I can't see it from here. I'm looking out over your shoulders. But what I think it's meant to reflect really is what I just mentioned. And I see Eva Mancuso is here, and I give her great credit for her work on behalf of the cities and towns. The cities and towns, again, organized by Governor McKee when he was lieutenant governor, brought a lawsuit. That's the municipality's lawsuit, which you see on the right, and then there's our lawsuit on the left. And it's really just meant to show that there were a lot of people working really hard for the people of the state. I'm not going to say that it didn't at times make this negotiation somewhat more complicated, but we ultimately achieved the maximum amount of money is achievable for the state of Rhode Island. And I will tell you that if you were to break this settlement down on a per capita basis, that Rhode Island does very, very well compared to our peers in Massachusetts. I think if you were to compare, Massachusetts signed on to the global deal, Connecticut signed on to the global deal, I believe Vermont did as well. And if you look at it on a per capita basis, a dollar for dollar per capita basis, Rhode Island per Rhode Islander did better than any of those states. This is largely a population-driven settlement. It was the amount that each state received under the global settlement was driven mostly by population, with some small enhancement for the intensity of the crisis in each individual state. But Rhode Island here did better than Connecticut and Massachusetts on a per capita basis. So this is how the monies will be broken down. And this breakdown here, again, reflects what I've just been talking about, this interplay between the cities and towns having their own lawsuit and the state of Rhode Island through this office having a lawsuit as well. The bottom line is that 100% of the money will be going to opioid abatement. I keep emphasizing that because I know how important that is to Rhode Islanders, that this money recovered for this purpose will be used to address this crisis. There has always, I think, been a sense, and I don't want to speak for the cities and towns, that they needed their own voice in these negotiations, that they did not want this to be a top-down agreement, that they wanted to receive funds directly. I obviously, on behalf of all the people in the state, like to think that I represent all of them, would treat them all equally, care for them all just the same, whether you live in Westerly or Woonsocket. And so we tried to craft an arrangement that would really accomplish both things. So 20% of these monies will go directly to the cities and towns for them to use as they deem fit for purposes of opioid abatement. The remaining 80% will be allocated to the state, again, for opioid abatement. And that money also will go to the cities and towns because it will go to the people of the state of Rhode Island who live in those cities and towns. So the winners here, regardless of how the money gets to them, whether it be through the cities or towns or through the state, the winners here are the people of the state of Rhode Island. But that explains why the agreement is structured the way that it is. So how will the money be spent? Who will be deciding how the money is spent? Well, I will tell you that even if I wanted to be that person, and frankly I do not, the last thing I want to do is to be a grant maker. I know that some of my colleagues in government do that, and it probably comes with more headaches than it's worth, but that is not something that I want to do, nor is it something that by law I can do. Under state law, all of the money is recovered by this office, and they are in the tens of millions of dollars, and really every year must be appropriated by the General Assembly. And that is by state statute, and in my judgment, frankly, that's the way it should be. I don't think we want attorneys general as grant makers. I don't think that is in the best interest of the people of the state. So, recognizing though that we want lots of input as to how this money should be spent, and we want to make very, very sure that the money is spent in exactly the right way. And I know everyone up here shares that view. we have established an advisory committee that will consist of broad representatives from around the state, both from the public sector and from those in public health and the community that can inform and advise Secretary Jones as she determines how to recommend to the General Assembly how to spend this money. And so that advisory committee has not been stood up yet. It will be. But it will have representatives from every part of the state. So Providence will be represented. Every other county in the state, including Providence County, will have a representative. So Providence will not be the only representative for Providence County. It's our largest county in the state, so we took that into account. So Providence will have a seat at the table, along with a representative from a city or town from each of the other 5 counties, well, 5 including Providence in the state. There will be 3 public health experts on this committee. It's really important that those are good and smart choices. You know, obviously, I think all of us know today that whether we're talking about COVID or we're talking about opioids, that we need the guidance of our public health officials to inform where this money should be spent and where it can do the most good. And then there will be 2 community representatives as well. And obviously, community voices are really important for us to hear as we determine how this money can be best spent. And of course, we're going to build on some of the good thinking through the Overdose Prevention Task Force, started under Governor Raimondo, has continued under Governor McKee, that has a whole host of really bright, smart minds from all aspects of coming at this problem from all aspects that can really advise where this money can and should go. We've talked about abatement. I've much mentioned it now 6 or 7 times. I think you get the point. It's really important to me and to everyone here that this money go to this end and to no other. So, you know, where do we go from here? As I mentioned, the first payments will be coming in the next few weeks. The documents are being, I think were filed yesterday or will be filed today. I believe they were filed yesterday. We've got to stand up that advisory committee and get them to work. We have to reach out to the community partners to get, frankly, the advisory committee. I have a seat at that table. There are many others, as I mentioned, to get ideas, bold ideas as to how we can address this crisis. And as I said, the distributions are subject to the appropriations process, but we anticipate that happening this summer. So what's left to do? As I mentioned, we are still in litigation with 2 entities. One is the Sackler family and Purdue Pharma. Just to remind you where we are on that, this office has brought a lawsuit against the Sacklers, both as individual family members, I believe 8 or 9 of them, as well as Rhodes Pharmaceuticals and Purdue Pharma. Purdue filed for bankruptcy back in 2019. This office has I've consistently objected to that bankruptcy. The Sackler family has spirited $10.4 billion out of the country. They want to escape liability for this crisis for paying far less. That is something that I and 8 of my fellow attorneys general around the country continue to object to. We're in the process of continuing to object today as we speak in New York. And so that litigation continues. You know, frankly, what Purdue was offering was $21 million over 9 years. It's just not enough to remedy their role in this crisis. So that work continues. We had a win in the district court in New York where those third-party releases for the Sackler family members were denied by a district court judge down there. That is now on appeal in the Second Circuit. We're going to continue to fight that fight with that small group of attorneys general, which I have banded together with, and we will continue to bring that fight. And then we have a case against Teva that continues, and our trial date is in March, and we will continue to bring that fight. You know, I started this presentation by giving you some numbers, and I mentioned in the context of mentioning those numbers that there are people and families behind every one of them. And I think all of us, whether you're watching now or later, or whether you're here in this room, can think of a person or a family member or a friend of a friend who suffered from this crisis. With us today is Deb Parenti, and Deb is someone that I've known since when I was U.S. Attorney. And so when I think about this money and what I hope it will do is save people like her son Peter, who overdosed in 2015 when he was 25 years old. And Deb and I spoke to high school students around the state when I was U.S. Attorney. And I saw in those presentations not only Deb's enormous strength and the way that she reached high school students, and we did a ton of these talks, but as they approached Peter's birthday or Mother's Day, I saw the heartbreak in Deb's eyes. And she was comforted by students. I know, Deb, you remember this. You were comforted by the students who came and hugged you after those presentations. So when I think about this crisis, I think less about the numbers and I think more about the people, like Peter. And I will tell you, I've never seen in my years of public service more strength than I saw at Westerly High School in October of 2017. In October of 2017, Deb was there, and she will remember this. There was a high school senior, and she had traveled this path from addiction to recovery. And she was speaking to the entire junior class at Westerly High School. Do you remember this, Deb? And she was telling them about her journey on that path. And the Westerly Sun reported it. If you're interested in the story, you can go back and find it. And what she told her fellow classmates was, I never thought it would happen to me. I was a mess my sophomore year. But I'm here, and I'm beating it. And so behind all the heartbreak, there's also hope. And it is my hope that with these funds, that other families will experience hope and less heartbreak. And so with that, that concludes my remarks. Thank you for coming. I'm going to turn the microphone now over to Governor McKee to share his thoughts today. Governor?
Thank you, Peter, and that's what it's about. It's about helping people that are struggling and making sure families get the help that they're looking for. So I want to just congratulate you and your staff for really putting this together in a way that as you have, that is going to help all 39 cities and towns and the people who live in all our communities. Of course, Speaker Sakachi and Senate President Ruggiero, you've worked on legislation really crucial to this issue, and I know that work is going to continue, and I look forward to working with you with that. Mayor Lombardi, as well as Mayor Lorza, Town Administrator Nona as well. Thank you for your leadership representing the communities that are dealing with this on the front lines every single day. And I also want to point out Secretary Jones here as well. You're going to play an important role in terms of using these funds and helping use these funds in a way that makes a significant difference to the health of our community. So thank you for that, Secretary. And I know that we've already put, I think, appropriate about $42 million of APRA funds towards behavioral health. So that work that you're going to be doing, especially coming out of the pandemic, as we exit it, hopefully in the next few months or next year, whatever time frame that is, that's going to be something important. I would also say 4 years ago, and a couple personal stories that I like to just share with you that related. After Eva Mancuso organized all the communities, and we met in Smithfield, if you recall, after that meeting, I went on a small business tour to another suburban community in the state of Rhode Island and sat with about 6 business owners. Halfway through that meeting, as we were talking about what we were doing during that day, one of the business owners got up and just said, Dan, I can't really continue. I don't know what's happened to my son tonight. He's been struggling with this issue for about 8 years, or more on addiction, and he doesn't know what street corner he's going to be picking him up at that evening. So we know that it impacts all different communities. I also recall a Westerly story as well, working with the fishermen in Westerly and a meeting in my office about how we were going to help the fishermen in the state of Rhode Island. And the person who organized that actually sent me a letter. I still have that letter at home, describing how his son died of an overdose that evening, the evening before we were going to meet. So that's why it pushes you to make sure that you understand that this is a personal issue to families, a personal issue to our communities. So I know that this is very important for us to do, and I think that it's important that it hits all our 39 cities and towns, but also the state needs to play a role in that. And so we're certainly determined to make sure that we use these funds to really make a difference over the long haul as they're coming in over the several years that the funds are going to come in, that the Attorney General, along with the municipalities, have worked out a good agreement here to make sure that we get the full benefit of that. we need to hold the drug makers accountable, and that's part of it. We need to make sure that the people in the state of Rhode Island understand the nature of what we're dealing with. If you're having painkillers or pain relief that is given by the doctors, we got to understand and respect what that means, and that's part of the education, not only from the state level, but the municipal level. And that's why it was so important to bring the municipal leaders in, so that they can deliver this message one at a time to each and every community, how important this funding will be, but also how important the education that's going to result from this funding, not only in treatment, education, but also preventative strategies that we're going to put in place. So again, I want to thank the Attorney General and your staff, Peter. Let's get the funding where it needs to go and put an end to this opioid crisis in the state of Rhode Island. And with that, I'll give the mic back to you.
All right, so next I'd like to ask, should I have this right here, Speaker Sakarchi to come forward and share his thoughts. Speaker?
Thank you, General. Good afternoon, or good morning, I should say. First, I'd like to congratulate the Attorney General and his team. It is not easy to accomplish what he did and what Eva Mancuso did working together. You see these wonderful statistics behind you, but as a practicing attorney, I will tell you that those things don't happen. Those things don't happen as, you file a lawsuit and you get a settlement. Absolutely not true. There's hours and hours of detailed litigation, production, subpoenas, interrogatories, witness prep that goes into it. And it's only because of the dedicated efforts of the Attorney General, his team, Eva Mancuso, her team, the cities and towns and the state came together to get this historic settlement. This is critically important for Rhode Island because, as the General said, behind every statistic, there's a person, there's a family that has lost someone or someone who needs treatment. So these funds are going to go for those purposes, and they're going to go for prevention, for mitigation, and for treatment. And thank you, General, and thank you, Eva Mancuso. This settlement will have a profound and immediate benefit on our communities, all of which have been devastated by the opioid crisis. The combination of foresight, persistence, and hard work by the Attorney General and his team has ensured that services, support, and critical treatment for many Rhode Islanders harmed by opiates will be funded for years to come. I'm incredibly proud that Rhode Island is leading the way in how we address opioid addiction. Last year, the Senate President and myself worked very hard to pass first in the country harm reduction centers. Controversial? Yes. Unanimous? Absolutely not. Been in the General Assembly for years, but needed, and we got it done. We look forward to see those centers up and operating and preventing and treating people who need it. Harm reduction centers have been shown to significantly mitigate the chance of an overdose. They are also a gateway to treatment and rehabilitation for people with substance abuse disorder. As the sponsor of that legislation at the House, Jay Edwards, said, people who overdose and die usually die alone. We need to attack this epidemic from multiple angles. In addition to the pilot program I just spoke about regarding harm reductions, the General Assembly expanded Rhode Island's Good Samaritan Overdose Prevention Act, making it easier for first responders to treat individuals who are overdosing and not worry about liability. For too long, pharmaceutical companies marketed opiates. They claimed that opiates were safe to use. When the sales skyrocketed, pharmaceutical companies profited and our communities suffered the fallout. As everyone here agrees, there is no amount of money that will undo the harm caused by opiates or that can bring back someone who has lost their life due to an overdose. However, As the General said, there is hope. There's hope that this settlement will help our communities to provide treatment, prevention, and mitigation to those who were affected. Thank you.
Thank you, Speaker. I'd like now to invite Senate President Ruggiero to come and share his thoughts. Senate President.
Thank you very much, General, and thank you all for being here today on this very important event. I, too, as the Speaker did, want to commend the Attorney General for the great job he did, and also the cities and towns, and even Mancuso, for their involvement in this particular issue. As he says, this is a very complicated issue. It doesn't just happen by osmosis, but they've done an outstanding job, and that's why we're here today. The opioid crisis has touched every person probably in the state of Rhode Island. It is critical that we do two things. One is hold those who are responsible for this crisis accountable. Secondly, allocate the sufficient resources for prevention and treatment. I'm grateful for the Attorney General and the great job that he and his staff and his leadership team have done, and also what the cities and towns attorneys have done regarding this issue. As we all know, this disease does not discriminate. It does not discriminate with age. It does not discriminate with gender. It does not discriminate on income. It does not discriminate at all. It is deadly. And from what we've seen and from the number of overdoses that we've seen in the state, especially during the pandemic, has been increasingly bad, and we've noticed that, and we're going to use this money and make sure that this money is used for the purpose that it was intended. Obviously, the resources that we are going to be getting will be helpful in this area. I've been proud to work with my colleagues in the General Assembly, Speaker Joe Sacacci, a lot of my colleagues who have been on the forefront of this particular issue. We've passed the Good Samaritan Overdose Treatment Act, increasing access to Narcan, and investing in prevention and treatment. I certainly want to thank the governor for his involvement and for the fact that he recognizes that this is an issue that needs immediate attention. And we are going to be doing that. We're going to be taking a look at this issue this coming year during our legislative session, and hopefully we will come to some conclusion that will make life better for many other people out there who are suffering from this addiction. Again, I want to thank the governor. I want to thank the Speaker of the House and his members, and I certainly want to thank the Attorney General and those people that he worked with for the outstanding job that they did. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you, Senate President. All right, now I'd like to introduce Mayor Elorza to share his thoughts. Mayor?
Good morning, everyone. I want to begin also by recognizing the AG, Peter Neronha. Thank you for leading this effort and for everything that you and your team have done to get us to this point. I also want to take a point of personal privilege for a brief moment and recognize our city solicitor in Providence, Jeff Dana, who has been working very closely and has been the lead point person for my team, working with the Attorney General and his team. So thank you, Jeff. I also want to recognize and thank the governor, the speaker, and the Senate President, not just for being here, but their courage in passing the harm reduction bill is truly something that we haven't seen throughout the country, and is placing Providence on the cutting edge, on the front lines of this work. So thank you to each of you for leading on this issue. I also want to recognize my colleagues in local government, Mayor Lombardi and Administrator Nona, along with adding my voice to the chorus, recognizing Eva and your work and what you did to bring folks together. Thank you, everyone. Last but not least, I want to recognize Secretary Jones for all the work that you lead and will continue to lead to address this issue. And as has already been mentioned, the opioid crisis is a national catastrophe that spared no one. I think, personally about my cousin Raquel, who became addicted to opioids as a teenager. And I saw firsthand how it had such a devastating impact on our own family, how my aunt and uncle, they worked so hard to save their first daughter from the ravages of these drugs. My cousin Raquel, unfortunately, she became more and more addicted, eventually started stealing eventually from the family, and you can just imagine how much heartbreak it caused until eventually she disappeared. And to this day, we don't know whether she's alive. We don't know where she is. And that's just one example. And I think it's fair to say that not a single person in our city, our state, or in our country has gone untouched by this crisis. As a point of example, as the AG mentioned, about 350 Rhode Islanders die every year from opioids. And as a point of comparison, roughly 30 Rhode Islanders die each year of gun violence, and about a couple of dozen die each year of car accidents. However, what's so sinister about opioid deaths is that many people suffer in silence. There's still this shame associated with opioid addiction and everything that leads to. And so it doesn't get the attention that the other more high-profile deaths do on a daily basis. But make no mistake about it, the dependency, the crime, and the widespread heartbreak and misery that it leads to is far greater than what we see in so many other areas. That's why I'm very happy to see that if not full justice, some justice is brought to some of the biggest drug dealers in world history. Nothing can be done to undo the despair that has been wrought by these opioids. But these dollars will certainly help as we address these issues going forward and make sure that fewer and fewer Rhode Islanders succumb to this in the future, and less families have to deal with the heartache that so many of us have already endured. Congratulations, AG, and I look forward to the work ahead.
All right. Mayor Lombardi, if you would, sir.
Thank you very much, Governor McKee, Attorney General, Neronha, Senate President, Speaker Shikachi, and all of our elected officials here this morning. As the President of the League of Cities and Towns, today's announcement is the result of what happens when municipalities and our state join together for the common good. This, ladies and gentlemen, could only occur when you had or have a governor then who was a lieutenant governor that was a municipal leader at the time and understands how important local involvement is. I'd like to thank the governor for that. Now, municipalities will have an active role in opioid abatement for the next decade. The major victory for our municipal government is having a voice at the table when decisions are going to be made for the spending of some $100 million. Each city and town is receiving funds to allocate the way they believe will be necessary for both reimbursement for the monies that were spent and for awareness and early intervention. This agreement between the state and local governments provides for equal representation. In my opinion, this is just another tool in our toolbox to address this serious opioid crisis. We are grateful to the governor Lieutenant Governor, for bringing us together to get involved in this national litigation early on. I can remember, as was stated, when Lieutenant Governor McKee brought us all in with Attorney Mancuso, urging that we all come together. Attorney General Nona, thank you for making sure that Rhode Island has its own settlement in place with immediate payouts so that we can put this money to work. This most definitely will make a difference in our cities and towns and help save lives. I'd also like to join Attorney General Nona in recognizing my childhood from Deb Parenti. Deb, God bless you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. And now I'd like to introduce East Greenwich Town Administrator Andy Nona. Andy?
Thank you. I'd like to just start off by thanking the governor for his continued leadership and the Attorney General for really for his personal work on this, as well as the team of the AG's office for delivering what is, what's going to be a substantive impact on all Rhode Island cities and towns. My colleagues that are here in strength today, in unity, and we as municipalities in Rhode Island like to pride ourselves in that respect. Your presence is being felt. I would like to acknowledge them for being here and their continued contributions on this critical initiative. Even Mancuso, who led the legal team for many of us that joined that lawsuit, give you much credit. We're not always easy to deal with, and you were able to cobble together the priorities that we all have, and there were many, and it was a broad conversation. But we do respect the articulation of the Attorney General relative to recognizing the statement and the need for a voice for municipalities on this issue. And I think that was heard, and we are much appreciative of the end result that came through in the MOU agreement. Just a couple of quick comments relative to, not about funding, but really about the reality of what this settlement will do. I'm really here to share some of the thoughts and perspectives briefly, and I enjoy playing the role of kind of wrapping up the municipal perspective. Really what it comes down to, Rhode Island is cobbled together and held together by less obvious, smaller cities and towns. This initiative, this opioid crisis, affects everyone. There's no border, as has been mentioned by many of the speakers here today. So ultimately, it's a lot of the less obvious communities that have actually sustained significant impacts, and we are now going to be in a position to be able to put together a well-balanced program and move forward to address this issue. East Greenwich, like many Rhode Island towns, has been forced to address the host of drug-related concerns impacting all age groups. We anticipate that these settlement funds will best be utilized by addressing problems where they occur, actually before they occur, through organized and targeted prevention initiatives on a statewide basis. We encourage the committee and communities to use funds targeted at those initiatives, along with creating, of course, supports for those that are seeking and actually need the help directly. East Greenwich, similar to many other cities and towns, has long dedicated resources to addressing substance abuse in its many forms. We happen to be one of the few communities that has a full-time director of substance abuse and mental health counseling. That has been needed no more than the past 2 years in pushing through our COVID pandemic crisis. There are many dynamics that lead to addiction and misuse that we're all familiar with, but I'm just going to note them quickly. Things that probably everybody in this room is familiar with: stress, anxiety, pain management, family dynamics, socioeconomics, and societal attitudes. With this added support, we anticipate augmenting endeavors by adding a comprehensive array of services at the municipal level on a statewide basis. Opioid abuse, along with other substance use, has clearly been exacerbated at all age levels over the past 2 years during our COVID crisis. Many facets of our community working in concert together on a local level and on a statewide level through our Rhode Island community will be needed to curtail the spread of drug use and abuse. With all of that being said, Rhode Island cities and towns appreciate the additional funding resources to help support our ongoing efforts and to build a program to address our present and future addiction challenges. This is not just a youth-related problem from our perspective. It's one that impacts our entire Rhode Island community and needs to be treated as such on a go-forward basis. Cities and towns, including East Greenwich, look forward to standing here at this podium again in the future as our effort continues in attempting to achieve additional settlements that will support our ongoing efforts to combat this crisis. Thank you.
All right, so before I take a couple of questions, or as many questions as you have, frankly, I just want to acknowledge a lot of the work that was done in this litigation. I want to start, on the state side with the state agencies that did a tremendous amount of work in gathering records so that we could prove the damages to the state of Rhode Island. So Secretary Jones and all the people who work with you and state agencies across the state, that was a tremendous amount of work that no one will probably ever see. But I can tell you countless of hours and millions of pages of records were necessary for us to build the kind of case that brought these defendants ultimately to the table, and will continue to inform our work as we proceed against the two defendants that remain outstanding. I also want to recognize the work here of the team in the office. There was a really strong team beginning with Neil Kelly, who's since retired, but really got us off to a great start here. Neil is just a terrific public servant, and I hope he's listening somewhere, and Neil, thank you. Miriam Weisenbaum, the chief of our civil division, which is where this case in the office lived. I mean, many times our criminal side gets a lot of attention, but our civil division is incredibly strong, stronger than ever. And this case is another example of that. Dan Sutton and Kate Sabatini that work with me and our policy team, two outstanding lawyers, did great work here. And then the Deputy Attorney General, Dee Goldstein. She is a force. For those of you who have dealt with Dee Goldstein, you know what a powerful voice she is for Rhode Islanders. And we would not be here today without her great work. And so I'll leave it there, and I will take questions.
Attorney General Nona, this may be a question for Mr. Jones as well. It's my understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, that the enabling legislation for harm reduction centers specifically prohibited city and state funding as well as federal funding, whereas grant money from this settlement may in fact be applied to that. Any idea of the percentage of this funding that will go to harm reduction centers, or is that part of the conversation you're going to have statewide?
Yeah, Pat, I think that's definitely part of the conversation. There's been no predetermined plan for where this money is going to go. This will be a plan or a set of plans that are informed by voices from all over the state. And that's why it was really important to me, frankly, to have Andy here. You can look at people up here and think this is a state, big city thing. It's not. This is a settlement that is going to benefit every Rhode Islander, whether you live in Barville or Bristol, Westerly, Woonsocket, Jamestown, or Johnston. It's going to affect everybody in a positive way. Other questions? Advisory committee, Steve? Yeah, look, we hope to have the money in. Yeah, well, we don't want it to be bogged down. And the good news is there's been a lot of good thinking in this space already. The Governor Raimondo, now Governor McKee's Opioid Prevention Task Force, the Department of Health, community partners. I see some of them out here have been working on this for a very long time. It's not going to be difficult, for example, to pick Senator Tassoni's brain and get some great ideas from him as well. And people like him. So my goal, and I think all of our goal, is to figure out where the money should go to have the most impact, get it to the General Assembly so they can appropriate it, and move it out the door quickly. That's the plan. Yes. Hi, Mary.
Could you explain to me what shall the core of your argument against Johnson & Johnson? What brought them to the table? What did they do?